Pokémon Legends Z-A.
Welcome back to the Nerdy Grail. Now, for gamers and for Pokemon fans alike, we're sort of a bit in limbo as to what the next massive project for Pokemon could be. Will it be another Legends game? Will it be another remake? Still hoping for Gen 5 remakes. Or will it be Generation 10? Will we finally get the reveal of what Gen 10 will be and what the first Gen 10 games will be? But in the meantime, I thought I would like to do a bit of reflection on a particular franchise within the main line of Pokemon games, that being the Pokemon Legends games, because I think they are some of the most unique mainline Pokemon games we have ever got, and are both absolutely fantastic and really fun games, but also do have one or two elements that make them a bit harder to replay, make them feel a bit tedious, and make you miss the general format that Pokemon has been doing over the years. So obviously in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Pokemon Legends Arceus and Pokemon Legends Z-A, both within the same video, and I am going to be giving you my positives and my negatives on both Legends Arceus and Legends Z-A, and telling you what I think of the games, what was good about them, what needs to improve, and just overall thoughts on the games in general. So let's sit back, relax, while I go through the Pokemon Legends games to determine which one of these I truly think is the best. So I think we should start from where it began and discuss Pokemon Legends Arceus. So let's begin by talking about the positives for Pokemon Legends Arceus. Now, if you do see me looking to one side, it's because I've got a lot of notes written down, because there's a ton of positives and negatives that I want to go through for Legends Arceus. So I'm going to go through the positives, then I'm going to pause the video, and we're going to come back and have a little look at the negatives. So let's just praise the game for a moment for being something that at the time was something vastly different and vastly innovative. You know, very, very different. You know, a Pokemon game that revisits a generation or a region, but this time has a bit of a twist on it, going back to the far past, how it all began, how the region started, how Pokemon came to be, how Pokemon catching systems came to be, you know, and what happened before these civilizations got built up and all these cities got built and everything. You know, you've got your main character who gets thrust back into the past, into the Hisui region, as it's known, and basically has to try and figure out how they got there and is there a way to return home. And I think that's just brilliant and really creative, and does sort of give you a bit of a change from the general format of you're in a region, you get given a starter, and you've got to beat 8 gyms, beat the Elite Four, become the champion, and then do a bit of a post-game afterwards and fight an evil team along the way. There's elements here and there that are basically the replacements of that, but I think in the most part it is different enough. And I think some of the positives is that I think there's quite rewarding exploration and research. So the core crust of the game really is you go into these different areas and wild lands, because most of it, there's no cities apart from Jubilife Village. And basically you capture Pokemon in the wild, you shake berries from trees, you collect fallen objects on the ground in order to create and craft different materials, whether it's your potions, items of clothing, your Pokeballs, and you capture Pokemon, and you're given basically a checklist of things to do. Catch a certain number of Pokemon, catch a certain number of Alpha Pokemon, evolve said Pokemon, stuff like that, and it really gives you rewards afterwards, because you go back to the professor and basically they'll reward you with crafts, they'll reward you with money, you know, and I think that's really, really good. So it makes it worth going out of your way to tick off the things on the list. You know, there's strategic battle changes. The battle style of the game, I think, is a lot more dynamic. They got these two different styles. They got agile and strong. So the agile one, you get to move quicker. You might move first, but your move's a little bit weaker. And then you've got the strong move styles where you might move second, but you'll do more damage. So it really gives a new layer of strategy to the game. and you can move around a lot more. Your character can dodge, so it really feels like you are actually battling said Pokemon, and I think that's really, really good. And again, changes it up from the more static play of, you know, turn-based, back and forth, one person attacking at a time, and you can't really see anything. So I thought that was good. The open world was quite immersive for the most part. You've got different variety of lands, snowy landscapes, you've got beaches, you've got forests, you've got the mountain, Mount Cornet. You can see these different landscapes and get to see the different type of Pokemon that live in said environments, and for the most part they make sense. You might find Combee and Vespiquen or Wormadams in the forest. You'll find like Bibarels and Magikarps along the Beast coastlines. You know, it was really, really good in the way they placed the Pokemon, and so I thought that was really, really good as well. I love the catching mechanics and obviously the shiny mechanics as well. You know, I thought the catching mechanics was quite fun, getting to sneak up on the Pokemon. If you sneak up on said Pokemon, they're more likely to get caught. If they notice you, you've got to battle it. You know, so I thought it was different and it could add a little bit of challenge to the game as well. It was a fairly challenging experience as well. I would say towards the end of the game, it's very, very challenging because there's not many trainers to fight, so getting experience is mostly done through battling wild Pokemon, catching wild Pokemon, and doing the research tasks. There are trainer battles here and there, and you have to fight like alpha Pokemon battles, like totem battles in Sun and Moon. So it made it like really, really difficult to gain levels, and when you got to like the latter battles in the game, when you're fighting like Giratina and stuff, and catching Arceus and all towards the end of the game, it made it very difficult, and you could end up dying a lot in the game and having to restart. And so I like that. I appreciated the level of challenge in the game as well. The removal, for the most part, of mandatory trading. You could get like items and buy items. It made it easier to fill up your Pokédex. I thought that was quite nice. And I did like the crafting system. I thought it was creative and it was really, really good and kept me engaged and kept me wanting to explore and try to find the different berries to make the best Pokeballs, best potions possible. So I thought that was all fantastic and done really, really well. So lots of props to Pokemon Legends Arceus for that. And the Pokédex is really, really good. I love the starter choice as well. I love that they got regional forms. I loved a lot of the regional forms, like Electrode, like Cleavor, you know, the Typhlosion. Just all of them, really, I thought were fantastic. Arcanine, getting those little new evolutions or new forms, I thought were done brilliantly and really fit the region that it was in. So props to Legends Arceus for that. But for all the positives that Legends Arceus has, I do have to turn towards the negatives of the game. So I'm just going to quickly pause the video and we're going to jump into discussing, sadly, some of the negatives that came from Legends Arceus, in my personal opinion. Like I said, for all the positives, there's of course going to be some negatives. And again, if you see me looking to one side, it's because I got lots of notes written down for this game. So I just want to discuss them so I can remember them off the top of my head. But yeah, overall, if you were to ask most people, I think a lot of people would say that they prefer Arceus to Legends Z-A. But I'll give you my personal preference at the end of the video. But we can't all deny that Legends Arceus, despite it being a very good game and very innovative at the time, and its performance is great, it was slow at times and there was glitches here and there like most Pokemon games, but there was some things that I think needed to be improved upon in Legends Arceus that maybe Legends Z-A did do to a degree, but there was some things, you know, being the first of its kind, you know, I don't think did quite right, but they were experimenting for the time. So I think the first thing to mention, and this is the case for a lot of Pokemon games, especially I seem to notice it a lot more on the Switch ones, is obviously technical and graphical issues. If you've played Scarlet and Violet, you know that there was glitches galore and textures pop in and out. Sword and Shield had the same problem. And yeah, there's a lot of areas in this game that sort of does suffer from that, whether it's blurry textures, whether it's, you know, environmental pop-ins here and there from Pokemon or trees or grass. You know, shadow rendering is a bit all over the place. It just feels like it wasn't quite done and they had to sort of rush it out to fit a particular time frame that they wanted to get the game out, which was a little bit of a problem for me here and there and did take me out of the immersion a little bit. You know, and I think it's such a shame because Legends Arceus, being that old-fashioned style, going back to the past, you know, I thought it could have been to something really, really fantastic. So to have those technical issues occasionally pop in and out for me did spoil it and take me out of the immersion a little bit. Despite me also giving a positive to the open world style, I must admit at times it did feel a little bit empty and lifeless because of the lack of trainers and the lack of cities despite the time period. You know, it just being Pokemon, it seemed very rinse and repeat, and it didn't seem like there was an awful lot to do outside of catching the Pokemon and collecting berries and stuff to craft your materials. That seemed about all there was to do, which does make it feel a bit empty, a little bit flat, and doesn't have an awful lot to do apart from just catching Pokemon, which I thought was a little bit of a shame in my opinion. And also on that point, I said it was a positive as well, but does have a negative aspect to it. Doing the research projects and getting the berries and catching the Pokemon, after a while, it does feel a bit tedious to grind it out in order, especially if you're a completionist and you want to get 100% and do everything in the game. It does feel very repetitive, and some tasks require you to do a certain move or catch a certain number of Pokemon like 40 times. And I just think after a while that gets really repetitive and gets a bit boring after a while. And so I think that's a little bit of a problem for me in Legends Arceus. Again, you know, because the world feels so lackluster, because there's not an awful lot of side quests, and the side quests there aren't thrilling and too exciting, to be perfectly honest. You know, there's not an awful lot to do, so it feels like there's a lack of content there. You know, despite it being quite a large game, it just feels like there's not much to do, and I think replayability of Legends Arceus isn't at the strongest point. Like, I haven't gone back to replay Legends Arceus an awful lot. I've probably played Legends Arceus maybe about 4 or 5 times, you know, since it came out 3 years ago now, nearly 4 years ago. Might even be 4 years ago now, to be honest. I think it came out in 2022. Whereas Legends Z-A has only been out about 3-4 months, and I've played through that game twice already. So you can see the difference there. Also, again, you know, limited battle mechanics and a lack of variety. You know, I think that happens a lot, and that's due to the lack of trainer battles, which is a bit of a shame in my personal opinion. And it just feels like this whole game was just a massive experiment that they just threw out there. And you can tell areas that aren't polished, like I said, due to maybe, you know, the technical glitches and environmental problems, or the lack of trainers, or the lack of post-game content. You know, it's just, there's something missing from this game that I think would take it from someone's 7 or 8 out of 10 to the 10 out of 10 that I think, you know, games should get, or Pokemon games should strive to be getting. And it's just such a shame, because I think overall it's a very fun game and I appreciate what it's done, but I can't deny there's some areas where it does feel a little bit lackluster. So that's Pokemon Legends Arceus. So let's move on then to the more modern Legends game and talk about the brand new game currently at the moment in the world of Pokemon, and go over the positives for Pokemon Legends Z-A. Moving on from Pokemon Legends Arceus, we are now going to be talking about Pokemon Legends Z-A. Now, I've got the Nintendo Switch 2 edition, and recently, obviously, in previous videos I have mentioned that I have beaten the DLC, and I had an awful lot of fun with the DLC. So let's talk about the positives, so the good things that happened in Pokemon Legends Z-A, and what Game Freak, the Pokemon Company, and so on did do right, at least in my personal opinion, or things that I think were more on the positive side than the negative side. So I think for the most part, and this is both a positive and a negative, I will talk about the positive aspect first, because I know a lot of people will also agree that this is a bit of a negative. Now, the performance and the visuals of the game. Now, I will say that on the whole, the visuals are really, really good. They are a lot smoother, especially when compared to Legends Arceus, and when you compare it to Scarlet and Violet, I think personally it's a lot better. It's significantly better, because I felt like there was a lot of time in Scarlet and Violet that the game felt really slow or would look like it's freezing and so on. But I never really experienced that with Legends Z-A. Now, is it perfect? Definitely not, and I will go over that in the negatives. But can I say that they are better? They are definitely better, so they definitely learned a little bit from their mistakes. And I will say at times, depending on the building that you're climbing, the visuals of Lumio City look gorgeous, and I think it is brilliant. So I think that is a positive to say. The battle system and battle style of the game I actually quite like. I like being able to move around the battlefield, being able to just throw moves left, right and centre, chain moves together. I like the ability to Mega Evolve multiple Pokemon within a battle, not just limit it to one Mega Pokemon per battle. I think that's really, really good. I do like the new way that you get to battle in the game, and it makes it harder to dodge moves as well. So it increases the difficulty of the game. Just wish that we didn't have the silly EXP alls still on our Pokemon. That still frustrates me. But I think overall, the dodging mechanics and the movement are a lot more fluid and a lot more fun. Yes, they can get a bit repetitive after a while, but I think there's enough variety there in terms of the Pokemon you use, the battle style you use, whether they're Mega or not, whether they're Alpha or not, to give you a different experience for each battle, and I think it's done in a very good way. The return of Mega Evolution is always going to be a positive on this list for me because I loved the concept of Mega Evolution when it was introduced in X and Y, carried then over to Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, and started to wear out then in like Sun and Moon, where it was more like a post-game thing, and then eventually it just vanished and we didn't see it again, and we had different gimmicks that came and went and didn't really stand the test of time, whereas Mega Evolution has made a return, bigger and better. I love Mega Evolution. I love the returning Megas. I love the new Megas. I've done videos ranking the Megas. I think they're great. I think they're good. I like how they do them as well. And I like how it's blended into the plot. I thought that was fantastic. So I really, really like the return of Mega Evolution. And it does enhance the battle experience, in my opinion anyway. Okay, I will say like the atmosphere of the game does feel pretty good for the most part. It is a bit goofy. Obviously, you are trapped within Lumio City, so it does feel a bit fresh, you know, the take. And you can go into like the sewers and stuff like that. So being confined to one area, you do feel a bit claustrophobic, but you do feel like you are now the protector of said city. Like you are the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man of said city, and it's your job to wonder what's going on and to protect it. Whereas, obviously, in previous games, you vast out amongst the whole region trying to solve what's going on, and sometimes that can be overwhelming. So for new gamers who want just a slightly smaller experience, I think just containing it to Lumio City was a decent idea, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, for us long-term fans, we would have preferred to have gone out and explored, you know, a new version of the Kalos region, but overall, I didn't mind being stuck in Lumios, but I will discuss some things in the negatives as well. Okay, I'd say the core group of characters and the story of the game as well was fairly good. I thought it was quite interesting that this game was actually set 5 years, I believe they said, after the events of X and Y. So despite this being the Legends series, and I thought, personally, based on the Hisui region being the past Sinnoh, we would get a past version of Kalos and maybe how Lumios was built and everything like that. Maybe we get to see the war that AZ fought in. But no, we actually went into the future. So the events of X and Y had already happened, and yeah, it was really weird. A unique take, so it was a sequel almost. And, you know, the group of characters that you got and how they incorporate Mega Evolution and all, it made sense, and I thought it was fairly good. Felt rushed at times, but again, I'll go into that in the negatives. But I thought overall, the storytelling was a little bit better for me in this game than it was in Legends Arceus. Whereas Arceus, it was a lot more shrouded in mystery, and it didn't really give too much away, which is a good thing to a degree. But I almost felt like there was too much mystery, and it got a bit confusing. And then the variety of Pokemon and starters, you know, getting multiple starters through the game, I think is a fantastic idea. Legends Arceus did teeter into that, you know, with your general starters, the Sinnoh starters. But in this game, you get, obviously, the starters of Totodile, Chikorita and Tepig, but also you get to have the Kanto starters, the Kalos starters, and then as you get to the post-game, you can have like the Hoenn starters. So you get a large variety of starters, so it's quite nice to do that. So, and most of those are early on in the game as well, so you could literally have a full team of starters if you want. So I like that, and I love all the new Megas that they were given, so I thought it was nice. Nice to have, you know, the customizable characters come back as well, with the dresses and everything. I thought that was really, really nice. You know, the wide variety of legendaries, the alpha Pokemon, the references to previous games and old characters, I thought was quite nice for us long-term fans. So I think overall, I enjoyed the experience. I liked the introduction of the Battle Royale. I thought that was pretty good. You know, it was a bit disappointing, you know, we're in a game where, you know, gyms and stuff were prominent and some things didn't make too much sense, and I would have liked to have seen that a bit more. But I think overall, it was quite interesting, and I like the variety in this game a lot more. So, we do have to talk about the negatives, though, for Legends Z-A. So let me just quickly pause the video, and we're going to jump in to discuss the negatives of Pokemon Legends Z-A. Okay, so we need to talk about the negatives now for Pokemon Legends Z-A. And unfortunately, there are negatives for the game. It wasn't a perfect game, and there was some things that either frustrated me, annoyed me, or I thought this should have been improved upon, or this should have been gone. So, okay, I did talk about the environment and the atmosphere, saying that it was great that we were contained to Lumio City, especially for newcomers. You know, it made the game feel big, but smaller scale enough for them to handle. However, I think this is also a big negative because being restricted to Lumio City made everything feel really repetitive, but I think they could have done better if they had allowed you to go in buildings and a lot more shops. Whereas a lot of it felt very flat. You couldn't go into a lot of buildings. You know, it lacked the expansion and lacked the open exploration that you could normally have. If we were able to go into more buildings and see the shops and stuff like that, I thought that would have been a lot better rather than go to just like a select screen. So it felt a bit lackluster in that respect, and to a degree, the open world felt almost better in Legends Arceus than it did in Legends Z-A, which is a shame because this is supposed to be built on from Legends Arceus, the next game in the franchise, so you should learn from your mistakes, where it felt like they almost repeated the mistakes but then doubled down on them at the same time. So it was very, very annoying because it did feel quite repetitive, and when you're running around the city, you feel like you just want to fast travel everywhere as opposed to walking through Lumios because there's not an awful lot to look at. It's just some large buildings and some Pokemon here and there, which is really a shame, to be honest. The visuals and performance, despite them being smoother and a bit better than Legends Arceus, I can't deny this game does suffer again from pop-in. There just seems to be something about these Switch games, especially the recent ones since Sword and Shield anyway, where pop-in is huge and happens all the time, and it is frustrating beyond belief. I've even had pop-ins during like hyperspace missions when there's been trainers who have just popped in and disrupted my flow, you know, or through the main game where Pokemon have just popped in and got in my way. And it's really, really annoying. Sometimes they'll even be alpha Pokemon. And I'm like, how is that even possible? But yeah, it's really frustrating, and it really pulls you out of the immersion. You know, you're looking at a beautiful city landscape, but then all of a sudden you've just got like a random Gengar that just pops in your face, and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? Or a person just magically appears. You know, it really breaks the immersion, and it's really, really annoying, and at times the graphics look really low detail. So despite them looking smoother, they also just don't look high quality, especially when you go back and watch the trailers and then see what you get in the game. You know, it doesn't feel great. The gameplay and the mechanics, there's some stuff I do like, and there's some stuff that I don't like. I've explained the stuff that I like. I like the new battle style, and I think it's great. I like the way you catch the Pokemon. I think that's great. But I just think that sometimes it can be a bit frustrating, and you can get really unbalanced teams as well. And I think, like, stealth is a big problem. Like, stealth was predominantly introduced in the later Switch games, and especially in Legends Arceus, stealth was a massive part. Hide in the grass, sneak up on Pokemon, throw a ball from behind, you're more likely to catch it. They tried that again in Pokemon Legends Z-A, but I felt like it was less effective in Legends Z-A. The amount of times I've snuck on a Pokemon, I've literally been hiding in a bush, and they have somehow seen me, and so that meant the catch rate has gotten lower, has frustrated me no end, and I'm like, why? And the worst part is when this happens during hyperspace missions, when you're on a time constraint, and you need to catch a certain number of Pokemon, or catch a specific Pokemon, and it really, really annoys me and frustrates me. So that needs to be fixed as well, because that was a major problem. It felt too janky, and it felt very ineffective to me. The liveliness of the city, like I said, and I think Pokemon still suffers from the fact that there's no voice acting. You know, you've got some really dramatic scenes in this game, but they feel pathetic and laughable because you've just got your characters basically doing this. And it's like, come on, you know, you could, liven it up a little bit. It does feel very lifeless. And it just makes it feel boring, and it makes you want to skip through cutscenes. There's not an awful lot going on. You know, Lumio City is a massive city. You could have like the go-goats dragging people along the streets, giving them rides. People sat at the cafe actually moving and drinking. chatting as well. That would be a lot better. There's lots you could do with Lumio City. Pokemon battles going on as well. I think that would be a great idea, but it just feels very lifeless in the city, and I think that is a massive shame to me. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the story and the pacing. Now, despite the story being better, in my opinion, it still lacked something. But the main problem is the pacing. The pacing in Pokémon Legends Z-A, I think, is one of the worst I've seen since Sun and Moon. Because Sun and Moon had the problem where it took forever in order to get your starter Pokemon, and they just dumped you with exposition beyond belief. And it's the same in Pokémon Legends Z-A. You get your starter fairly quickly, but you're still in a tutorial after like an hour or 2 hours into the game, and it feels like such a long time to get going. And there's some side quests and side missions and even some main missions that just feel like, what on earth is the point in this? This feels pointless. You know, some of them is just like, oh, what do you think of my Pokemon? Oh, thank you for that. Here's a grand and here's some super potions. Or battle my Pokemon using the move Detect. You know, some of them are really annoying, really tedious, and really difficult to obtain, because some of them, you get the side mission, and the Pokemon they need for that battle is not unlockable until way later in the game. Well, don't give me that side mission at the start of the game then. Give it to me when I'm able to access that item or that Pokemon. I just don't understand. And, you know, again, another game that gives you DLC, and I'm not a fan of DLC, if I'm perfectly honest. Put it in my main game, please. But yeah, I think pacing was a massive problem for Legends Z-A. And definitely pacing was worse in Legends Z-A than it was in Legends Arceus, in my personal opinion. So I'm just going to wrap up now and just give you my overall thoughts on Pokemon Legends Z-A and Legends Arceus and tell you which one I prefer overall. So to conclude this video on which game is better between Pokemon Legends Arceus and Legends Z-A, I think overall both games suffer with pretty similar things. Both are fairly open world games, but both also feel quite lifeless and empty at times. Both have fairly good graphics, but both also suffer with graphical errors or glitches or fairly lifeless environments. You know, both have introduced great new mechanics for their battle styles, like Arceus' agile and strong style, and then the Mega Evolution and the lack of turn-based stuff in Pokemon Legends Z-A, where you can just attack and do multiple attacks at once. I thought that was great, but also it makes things tedious and boring, like in Arceus, where you have to then do research tasks based on it, and Legends Z-A, where they lock off moves, or it makes it too difficult in order to dodge. You know, there's positives and negatives here and there, and I think both games are fairly strong and fairly fun Pokemon games. And I'm fairly certain if I was to rate them overall, I'd probably rate them maybe like a 7 out of 10, both of them, Legends Arceus and Legends Z-A. I think overall they are probably about a 7 out of 10. But which one do I actually prefer? Well, it depends on the day and when you ask me. I would suppose at the moment, because for me, in order to be a good Pokemon game, or well, not a good Pokemon game, but to be my preferred Pokemon game between two games, firstly, it's got to be a game that I've enjoyed, it's got to be a game that I've replayed, and it's got to be a game that I've been engaged with and want to replay. And I think between the two games, I have replayed Arceus more, but based on the timescale, I have played Z-A more, and I'm wanting to play Z-A a little bit more to try new Pokemon, and I'm still going strong on that game. So I think at the moment, I think I'm going to give the win to Pokemon Legends Z-A, but I think that is only just because it's still the newer of the two games. The DLC came out and so expanded upon that, whereas Legends Arceus didn't. And obviously Legends Arceus having the more tedious research missions has put me off wanting to go back to playing that. But I will go back eventually. But I think at the moment I'm going to give the win to Pokemon Legends Z-A. However, I think they are both very good games. But that is going to be my discussion video talking about Pokemon Legends Arceus and Pokemon Legends Z-A. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving it a thumbs up and comment down below your thoughts on which game you prefer and why. And subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nerdy Girl signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day and I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now, everyone.